What's going on here? Why are you on top of her?
She's in cardiac arrest. I'm doing CPR. I can't
Did you call
stop.
this in? What exactly happened?
No signal out here. Check my ID. I'm a fire captain. Please let me save her.
Copy. EMS requesting.
Have you ever trusted your own eyes so completely that you refuse to see the truth right in front of you? Perception is a powerful mechanism. It helps us navigate the world, allowing our brains to fill in the blanks in a fraction of a second so we can react to our environment. But when that perception is clouded by unexamined biases and snap judgments, it can turn a scene of desperate heroism into an absolute tragedy. What happens when the very person fighting to pull someone back from the edge of death is suddenly viewed as the threat? Today, we are looking at a profound series of events that challenges everything we think we know about situational awareness, the danger of deep-seated assumptions, and the incredible cost of ignoring reality in favor of a preconceived narrative. At the end of this journey, you might find yourself questioning how you would react if you stumbled upon a life-or-death scenario. Our story begins with a man who dedicated his entire adult life to the service of others. Isaiah was a veteran first responder, a seasoned captain at a bustling city firehouse who had spent 2 decades pulling people out of the darkest moments of their lives. For him, emergency medicine was not just a career path, it was a fundamental part of his identity. He had earned advanced certifications, taught life-saving techniques to both rookies and civilians, and wore a uniform that represented safety to anyone in distress. Being a captain meant carrying the weight of his crew's lives on his shoulders, a responsibility he never took lightly. Even when he stripped off the heavy turnout gear and headed home to his wife and 2 young children, the instinct to protect never really turned off. To maintain the grueling physical stamina required for hauling hoses, carrying victims, and performing endless medical interventions, Isaiah kept himself in peak physical condition. His preferred method of decompressing from the chaos of the firehouse was a quiet, early morning run through a sprawling local nature reserve. It was his sanctuary, a place where the blaring sirens were replaced by the sound of wind through the canopy. On a crisp, otherwise ordinary Wednesday morning, another early riser was seeking her own peace in that exact same park. Rebecca, a high-level corporate executive, carried a different kind of stress. Her days were dominated by relentless deadlines, board meetings, and the constant pressure of a demanding industry. Her morning jog was her armor, a solitary ritual she had strictly maintained for several years to clear her mind before the corporate noise began. She was incredibly fit, disciplined, and seemingly the picture of perfect health. But biology can be a silent betrayer. Hidden deep within the electrical pathways of her heart was a microscopic flaw, a completely asymptomatic condition that offered absolutely no warning signs. As she navigated a secluded, tree-heavy portion of her usual route, that hidden flaw violently activated. Without any chest pain, without any shortness of breath, her heart's natural pacemaker simply spiraled into absolute chaos. Blood stopped flowing. Oxygen stopped reaching her brain. One moment she was running, lost in her thoughts, and the very next, her consciousness was entirely extinguished. She collapsed violently onto the hard dirt path, unable to brace her fall. Isaiah happened to be running just a short distance behind her. He did not know her, but his eyes registered the mechanics of her fall instantly. A normal trip and fall involves hands flying out, knees bending, a protective instinct. But when someone drops like a stone, completely limp, a first responder's brain immediately shifts gears. The peaceful morning vanished, replaced instantly by the hyper-focused reality of a medical emergency. He sprinted the remaining distance, dropping to the gravel beside her unresponsive body. His fingers automatically found the hollow of her neck, searching for the familiar thud of a pulse. There was nothing but stillness. He checked her airway, looking for the rise and fall of her chest. Nothing. She was gone, or at least she was slipping away fast. In this isolated section of the woods, the tree cover completely blocked his cellular signal. He could not summon an ambulance, and he could not leave her to find a better signal. He was completely alone with a dying stranger, and he knew that the only thing standing between her and permanent brain death was his own physical endurance. Without a second thought, Isaiah locked his hands together, positioned the heel of his palm directly over the center of her chest, and began to push. Deep, fast, rhythmic pushes designed to manually squeeze the heart against the spine, forcing whatever oxygenated blood was left in her system up to her starving brain. It is an incredibly violent, physically demanding act. After just a few minutes, lactic acid builds in the shoulders, the lower back screams in protest, and sweat begins to blind you. But Isaiah was a professional. He counted out loud, forcing his own breathing into a steady rhythm, pushing down hard, and then delivering vital rescue breaths to keep her lungs viable. 5 minutes passed, then 7, then 9. He was operating purely on adrenaline and muscle memory, speaking to her, begging her to hold on, promising her that she was not going to die on this dirt path. He was exhausted, but quitting was simply not an option. It was in this desperate, critical window that a third person entered the equation. Another runner, a local attorney named Michael, came jogging around the bend. Here is where the human brain's reliance on quick assumptions becomes terribly dangerous. Michael encountered a chaotic visual, a completely isolated stretch of woods, an unresponsive woman lying flat on her back, and a heavily sweating man straddling her, forcefully pushing down on her chest. Instead of recognizing the rigid, locked-arm posture of emergency chest compressions, Michael's brain bypassed logic and seized upon fear and societal biases. He looked at a black man frantically working over an unconscious white woman and instantly, disastrously, misjudged the entire situation. He did not see a medical intervention. He perceived a violent attack. Michael stopped at a distance and began shouting. Isaiah, feeling a massive wave of relief that someone else was finally there, immediately called out for help. He clearly shouted his identity, stated that he was an off-duty fire captain, explained that the woman was experiencing a catastrophic medical event, and begged the man to run to a clearing and dial emergency services. But the barrier of assumption was already too thick. Michael retreated to a spot with cellular reception, but he did not request paramedics for a collapsed runner. He urgently reported an ongoing violent assault. When law enforcement officers receive a high-priority dispatch regarding an assault in progress, their adrenaline surges. It dictates a forceful, immediate response to neutralize a threat. 2 responding officers rushed down the trail, their minds already primed by the caller's false narrative. When they broke through the tree line, their biased expectations seemed to be confirmed by the visual scene. They immediately drew their weapons and ordered Isaiah to step away from the victim. Imagine the agonizing dilemma Isaiah faced in that exact split second. As a seasoned professional, he deeply respected law enforcement and understood the absolute necessity of compliance. But as a medical expert, he also knew an undeniable biological fact. If he stopped manually pumping this woman's heart, her brain would begin to die within seconds. He tried to bridge the gap with frantic, desperate communication. Continuing his compressions, he begged the officers to listen. He yelled out his badge number, his designated station, and explicitly told them exactly which pocket of his running gear held his official departmental identification. He pleaded with them to simply make a radio call to verify his identity, promising he would comply the very second paramedics arrived to take over the life-saving measures. But the officers were trapped in their own tunnel vision, adhering strictly to a tactical protocol based on a deeply flawed premise. They completely bypassed the legal concept of a reasonable investigative stop. They did not assess the medical reality of the victim, nor did they verify the easily accessible credentials of the man speaking to them. Instead, they moved in with physical force. They grabbed Isaiah's arms, breaking his life-saving rhythm, physically dragging him off the dying woman, and forcing his face into the dirt to apply handcuffs. As the cold metal clicked around his wrists, Isaiah did not care about his own indignity. His eyes were locked on the woman lying motionless on the gravel. He screamed out, his voice cracking with pure anguish, begging the officers to at least take over the chest compressions. He tried to give them the exact tempo, pleading with them to keep her blood flowing. But the officers, firmly believing they had just secured a crime scene, ordered him to be silent and simply waited for medical transport. For 3 agonizing minutes, absolutely nothing happened. 3 minutes where a human heart sat still. 3 minutes where a brain was completely deprived of oxygen. 3 long, catastrophic minutes that never should have occurred. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics immediately recognized what the police had completely missed. They rushed past the officers, threw their equipment onto the ground, and immediately initiated advanced life support. They shocked her heart, pushed vital medications through her veins, and managed to re-establish a fragile pulse. As they hastily loaded her onto the stretcher, the lead paramedic looked back at the officers and the handcuffed man in the dirt. Isaiah, his voice raspy and defeated, quickly relayed the exact medical timeline, noting the precise duration of his solo interventions and the devastating 3-minute gap. The paramedic's face dropped in horror as he informed the officers that they had just arrested a fellow first responder and actively interrupted a successful resuscitation. Isaiah was transported to the precinct, treated as a hostile suspect, and left in an interrogation room still covered in the dust of the trail and the sweat of his heroic efforts. But the truth is incredibly stubborn, and modern technology leaves an undeniable footprint. At the emergency room, doctors removed the woman's advanced fitness smartwatch. The downloaded data painted a flawless, irrefutable timeline of events. It showed the exact second her heart rate spiked into a lethal rhythm and plummeted to 0. It showed the precise moment seconds later when a steady, heavy rhythmic pressure began on her chest. The data graph reflected 10 solid minutes of textbook, perfect emergency care. And then, terrifyingly, it showed an abrupt, unnatural halt to that care, followed by 3 minutes of absolute deadly flatline before the paramedics arrived. Simultaneously, a local cyclist who had ridden past the scene earlier that morning uploaded his helmet camera footage to the internet. The video clearly showed Isaiah, completely alone, executing flawless medical maneuvers, counting loudly, and acting with the utmost professionalism. The visual evidence combined with the digital biometric data completely shattered the false narrative of the assault. The police department's chain of command realized the catastrophic magnitude of their officers' misjudgment. Isaiah was released without a word of apology, walking out into the arms of his terrified wife, his mind still entirely consumed by whether the stranger he tried to save was going to survive the delay he couldn't prevent. She did survive, but those 3 missing minutes demanded a heavy toll. Rebecca spent days in a medically induced coma, her body fighting to repair the neurological damage caused by the prolonged oxygen deprivation. When she finally woke up, disoriented and fragile, her medical team gently explained the miracle of her survival. They told her about the off-duty captain who refused to let her die. But then they had to tell her the rest of the story. They had to explain that her savior was criminalized, thrown into the dirt, and treated as a predator simply because of how the scene looked to people blinded by their own unexamined assumptions. Rebecca was devastated, and that devastation quickly turned into a fierce, protective anger. From her hospital bed, she initiated a powerful public campaign. She spoke directly to the media, detailing the absolute absurdity and the profound injustice of the situation. She highlighted the painful reality that a dedicated professional, a man whose entire life was built around protecting the vulnerable, was instantly judged as a threat due to deeply ingrained societal biases. Her impassioned defense of Isaiah sparked a massive public outcry, leading to a watershed legal battle against the city and the police department. The resulting civil rights lawsuit was swift and decisive. The legal proceedings exposed the dangerous inadequacy of the officer's actions. During the depositions, the jogger who made the initial call and the officers who made the arrest were forced to confront the uncomfortable, glaring truth. They had to admit on the record that they ignored verbal explanations, refused to check readily available identification, and failed to recognize basic medical procedures, all because they made a fatal assumption based on the appearances of the individuals involved. The city was forced into a massive multi-million-dollar settlement, but more importantly, the case forced a complete overhaul of departmental policies. Law enforcement agencies across the region implemented strict new mandates requiring comprehensive medical emergency recognition training, cross-training with fire departments, and rigid protocols requiring the verification of professional credentials before interrupting any Good Samaritan providing aid. The officers involved faced severe professional consequences, and the bystander who made the false report was mandated to perform hundreds of hours of community service, specifically assigned to teaching emergency response classes. Months later, in a quiet, deeply emotional ceremony, Rebecca finally met the man who gave her a second chance at life. She walked across a stage, looking at Isaiah in his formal uniform, and broke down in tears. She thanked him not just for the 10 minutes of back-breaking physical labor he performed to keep her alive, but for the profound grace he showed in the face of absolute indignity. Together, they channeled their shared trauma into a powerful educational foundation, dedicating resources to training underserved communities in emergency response techniques, ensuring that the skills that saved her life could be spread as widely as possible. Isaiah eventually returned to his firehouse, stepping back onto the trucks, continuing to answer the call of duty. When he stands in front of his new recruits today, he teaches them the mechanics of chest compressions and rescue breathing, but he also imparts a much deeper, harder lesson. He tells them about the trail. He tells them about the dirt, the handcuffs, and the profound feeling of helplessness. He teaches them that true service often comes at a personal cost. Sometimes doing the right thing means acting even when the world misunderstands your intentions. It means holding the line between life and death, even if the people around you fail to see the truth. This story forces all of us to look in the mirror and examine the lenses through which we view the world. Our brains are wired to make quick assessments, but those assessments are deeply influenced by the narratives we have passively absorbed. When we allow unexamined prejudice to dictate our actions, we risk destroying the very fabric of community and heroism that keeps society functioning. Captain Isaiah Monroe did not just save a life that morning, he held up a mirror to a broken system and forced it to change. He proved that true integrity cannot be handcuffed, and that the rhythm of a hero's heart will always outlast the noise of ignorance. If you were walking down a path and saw a confusing, high-stakes situation, would you take the necessary seconds to truly understand what you were looking at, or would you let your assumptions make the call? How we answer that question might just be the difference between a tragedy and a miracle.